Hello and welcome back to a new series of Forgotten Up 2. I will call this Tears Forever map retrospective, where I take a look at all the maps I've made over the years of FH2. I'm gonna start with this one, because now this one was never released. It's called Tago. It was made when the Eastern Front was first developed, which is, as you can see, like some kits don't work anymore. And this map was never released because it's not very good, but it's one of the first ones that I made that is kind of finished, and we used it for testing purposes a little bit during the Eastern Front development. As you can see, it's throwing up errors. Also, I think the undergrowth doesn't work. Yeah. Anyway, this was based on a battle in August 1944. As you can see here, this was actually the first battle, or one of the first battles, where the IS-2 was actually used. And if I remember correctly, what I did do the first time here is trying to do like procedurally generated cliffs and stuff like that, which kind of look good, but not really. That said, these textures do look better than the ones I made before. So here we are on the German side. The Germans had, I think, 5 flags. 1, 2, 3. No, only 4. 4 flags. The map isn't that big. It might look kind of big from the mini-map, but if you look, you can already see towards the Russian main base from here. I think it's a 1 × 1 kilometer map, which I wouldn't recommend doing in most of cases. At least for something like that. That said, this has kind of a vibe similar to Arad, I guess. It's not very realistic in terms of terrain, but I think this would actually mildly... Oh, that's bad. This would actually kind of work from a gameplay perspective, at least to a degree. I think it would play okay, but it's certainly not useful. Oh yeah, that's typical noob mapper behavior here, building cool stuff like this, trying to be clever. Actually, I remember something now. Oh, that's not good. I think I didn't really know how the roads worked back then. But as I said, I don't think this would be useful as a tournament map. It's way too small and doesn't have enough areas that you can use for additional flags. Now, this area I was really proud of. This is like a mine, an old abandoned mine, and I felt really clever with some of the stuff I made here. Now, the initial version of this, I went completely crazy, and it went way down here, and it looked like something from the Lord of the Rings, like the Mines of Moria, with like wooden balustrades going along the cliff, but obviously because of the terrain lots, it warped horribly when you even were really close to it. Like the terrain warped, it looked completely horrible. You can't do stuff like that in the engine, or at least not the way I did it. Another thing, you might notice that there's like yellow elements here. This was a mistake. I fucked something up during the texturing process because I still wasn't really capable of that. So I said, well, you know, it looks kind of like there's like chemical residue or whatever they're mining in there, so I just left it and acted like it was intentional, but it wasn't. You can see here in the German main base there's another feature that you can often see in new mappers and also at this point in my maps, is that at some point I ran out of patience and energy, and so this is extremely sparse. Like I mapped from the Russian main base down to this, I think. Okay, I did use pickup kits already, interesting. So yeah, this is extremely sparse. And there's stuff here like, I wanted to add this derailed train as a detail, which is a good idea, and I've done that same thing on Silo Heights when I worked on that. But it's not like it's just standing here in this sparse terrain. It's not really graphically linked up to anything, so it just looks out of place and odd. So yeah, not a really good map, but I mean everybody has to start somewhere, and you have to practice and make lots of really bad maps before a good one comes out at one point. Now next I wanted to show you Malmedy, but I can't get that to run. Or Operation Greif, I think it's called, Operation Greif. But I already showed that 8 years ago in a video, so just look for Tears Forever Malmedy and you would see that one. Now this is another map that is actually very early, but this one was played on the public server during the Arm and Ace event, and I think also later on some kind of event. Now this is Kakov Outskirts, which was a remake of an FH1 map of the same name. I made that together with Schism RVTL, who is the guy behind Port Embassy, and Karen. And now this map is also not great. It's a big tank map, but it's way too narrow for that. I think the original map was wider and had the objectives more spaced out, but it also was a case of these FH1 maps often had the objectives just in random places. And then it was like, each objective was like 2 tents and a little sandbag wall or whatever. And of course that's not how an FH2 map works. So yeah, also in that FH1 map the actual Kakov flag, which is called 40th Army here, was this big kind of industrial area, the outskirts of Kakov, that's what it's named after. And so I made this area here, and I think Schism worked on this as well, made this area here, but it's like in FH2 you have to spend so much time to make a kind of cool looking city area that it was like, oh, I want people to fight here, so I made it so you can theoretically cap it and fight here. Although I don't think this has ever happened on the public server, because usually what happens is that in the central area where I will spawn next, there was this big tank stalemate with everybody sniping at each other. These rock walls here were actually custom made for a map that was in the very first planned Eastern Front release. There was a map called Crimea, and that's what this was made for, but it's only used on this map now, on this custom map basically. Now that Crimea map was worked on by Fenring, who also made Operation Lüttich, as well as, I want to say, Gazala. He made a bunch of maps for early FH2, but this iteration of the Eastern Front was never finished, and basically development died during that time, and this is kind of a last relic of that. So yeah, I want to say this area was reworked by Schism as well, because we worked on the map together. Like this objective area with the church being placed on a hill, that's his signature. This whole thing looks like something he would do. You can also see that on Summatus, I think he was involved with that as well. And of course the German main base. There was another feature that I was really proud of, which is this quarry here. I thought that was really cool. Although probably kind of isn't. Now you might think, well, this looks already a lot better than that first Eastern Front map, and that is, I would say, 80%, because, well, for one thing, as I said, Schism worked on it, but I also completely redid the textures, the color textures, to be more exact, before the Arm and Ace event, and this is why this looks kind of cool, especially with the lighting, because now I know how to do that stuff. So yeah, that's why this does not look completely horrible, but yeah, I would not put this into the, yeah, as I said, this quarry I was thinking was the shit. And if anything, now that I think about it, this is kind of the slightly more professional version of that mine on Tago from us. But yeah, as I wanted to say, I would not advocate for this being put into the main mod. It's not massively balanced, and it's also not really in keeping with our more modern style here. But yeah, I think this is actually the first map that I made that eventually ended up being played normally on the public server. The first map that I was really involved in, and that was added to the main version of the mod, is this one, which you are probably familiar with, Omar Beach. Now I did not make this one from scratch, however I would say I made like a bit more than 2/3 of it. So this map was worked on by a guy whose name, frankly, I forgot, and he left the team at one point. There's no drama there, it was just personal things, you know, it happens. So when I got the map, this first sector was there But there were important differences. For one thing, instead of these MG nests, there were these Saving Private Ryan bunkers. I added this one as well as a historical note. So there were these big Saving Private Ryan slit bunkers, which were wrong. Now all this stuff here, all these custom bunkers had been made already. And were already placed. So this area I had not that much to do with. As I said, I made it a bit more historically accurate. And one thing that I'm kind of still proud of, I added stuff like this here. Because I felt there needed to be some actual like designed cover on the beach. I added these details here, which looks like kind of algae or whatever being swept to the beach. And I added these areas here where I thought, you could hide at the water's edge. Because before that, the boats were all spaced out, right? And I bunched them up here. Just so you have, at least to a degree, like a home base for the Americans to take cover and to assault on the beach from, And I think, I made several of these areas, and I think there was a good call. Although, of course, it's a huge meat grinder in the first sector here. Now the back 2/3 of the map, so this whole area here was made by me based on satellite images, one historical map, and also, of course, Google Street View. For this area here I got yelled at by Toddle, one of our most senior devs, who sometimes still comes in, because I had placed these so that you had to jump over them and you could easily get stuck, so they were placed more here, and he yelled at me not to do that in the map, and he was right. So I moved that. Nobody has ever noticed that probably, but so I moved that away so you can run through it. This chateau area is still very recognizable on Google Earth with this, what do you even call that? It's not a driveway, but with this garden here with this weirdly formed circular pathways. The map is a 1-to-1 map, by the way. And yeah, this whole area is pretty close to how it looks even today. Now, one thing that I also did was I made the fields so they were very realistic, and that also meant that they were quite big. And I'm pretty sure I got a lot of flack because that meant that often the OOB area looked kind of empty, and I actually think somebody, I don't know if it was Stubfan or maybe Kev, they did actually add more hedges in historically inaccurate areas in the OOB area to make it look a bit better. Probably was the right call, but at the time I thought it was unnecessary. But it was a bit of laziness on my part as well. As I said, back then I still had kind of that problem of running out of steam on a map. I am actually quite proud of this area, this last one, which I obviously completely made myself because this part of the map was utterly empty. And the reason I'm proud is there was kind of a challenge here. So normally the last sector is the hardest, but in this map it's kind of inverted because, in my opinion, after the Americans got, shot at and shot to pieces on that beach for so long and pushed inland, the last sector should be kind of easy. It's kind of an inverted sector push map. And but at the same time, obviously, there should be some tactics in combat. So I liked, and I still like the flanking route that I built in, where you can kind of sneak up from the side. And this position here isn't that strong, especially when the Americans bring their tanks. But Germans still gravitate towards it and shoot from the windows. So you have one last kind of cinematic battle at the end, of course, also with the church. Now, one thing that I wouldn't do these days are these pallets here, which are historically inaccurate, and also why would they be there, and also how would you get them up here. But back then, and even up until recently, I just put them in just as a shorthand for, okay, let's put some detail, and I didn't even think about it that much. I also decided to block off this church tower, because I felt it would otherwise be too overpowered if they had squad leaders in there and could contest the flag all the time. But yeah, this was the first flag that was released. I will actually do one of these for each of the flags I made. Maybe even some that I haven't released between, because I often worked on projects that I never finished and never got into the game. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.